curveball. But what's funny is your anxiety may have blocked your path, but it actually somewhat led you into your line of work anyways.
125%. I'm telling you, it's my friend. Like, I actually acknowledge it. I make
Oh.
fun of it. I cry about it. I get mad at it, but it is something I've learned to live with. And I
But it's funny how it's
appreciate
not
it.
the motivator. It just happened to
It just
help you.
happened.
It nudged you in the right direction that you didn't know was the right direction. So
Exactly.
it's pretty cool, you know?
So
That's a great story.
long as you find meaning, and I think a lot of us in mental health or trauma, we don't find meaning. And I think there's a lot of research that shows if you find meaning in your struggle, you're able to um, you're able to move forward
Utilize
a
it.
little bit
Oh
better
yeah, yeah.
than if
Yeah.
you find like why me, why me, why me.
Another episode of the Speak Real podcast, sharing one-on-one conversations. We believe that storytelling is the best way to empower youth and give them the platform to find their voices.
Presented by YouthSpeak. Youth experience, youth voice, youth empowered.
Well, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Speak Real podcast, brought to you by YouthSpeak Canada Charities. Now, I do have to say, this is my last podcast here at YouthSpeak, and I just want to give a quick shout out to YouthSpeak for being such an awesome part of my life here for the past year. They've allowed me to be able to speak to so many cool people, so many interesting people. I've learned a lot within my own field here. I mean, my background is in psychology, so being able to have that opportunity to be able to discuss topics that I truly care a lot about has just been a grand time. So just want to say thank you to everybody who has maybe watched some of the episodes that I've been involved in, or if you've seen me over at the IG lives that are done at YouthSpeak. But before we go and get into our my final podcast, not ours, because you're definitely going to see some more coming from YouthSpeak throughout the year. But as always, we got to give a big shout out here to TD Bank. They sponsoring all of our IG lives and podcasts. They're able to at least come here, you know, as we try to every other week bring you something, and they have been able to give us that opportunity. So tonight we are going to go and welcome back Kavita, who has actually been on our IG live before, and I was the one that was able to host that night. So we're going to go ahead and just revisit some of the themes that we talked about and get into a little bit more detail. We might even get a little scientific, so we're going to see how it goes. But without further ado, we are going to go ahead and welcome Kavita in. And here she is. There's Kavita. She's going to be speaking on this here today. And I gassed her up so much in the introduction, so I'm gonna let her gas herself up this now. You know, she could talk about herself a bit and let us know more what she's about. So go ahead, Kavita. Take it away. Tell us what you like.
Thank you. I'm really bad at it, so I will try my best. So hi everyone, my name is Kavita. I am a social worker by profession, but I've worked in the field for over like 15 years. I was a youth worker. I was a teacher. Now I'm a clinical social worker. I currently my position is working with the vulnerable population, especially in relations to mental health and trauma, and I'm really enjoying that. It's an honor to be working with my clients. But I have experience working with the police, the York Region Police, as a crisis counselor. And I work at CMHA, Canadian Mental Health York Association, as a family worker. So I have a variety of descriptions under my belt. But yeah, overall, it's all about social work, and I really like it because I feel like this is something that, not everyone gets to do what they love, right? So I'm very fortunate to do that. But yeah, anyway, thank you for having me here.
You know, I forgot how many hats you've worn. I remember I was so impressed. Like I mentioned, we already discussed on IG Live, and I remember how I was blown away by just how many different roles you've had. And yeah, you're very well rounded, and I think that definitely helps you with your social work because, I mean, you know almost so many facets of how it feels in a certain experience, especially with trauma. So, and of course, trauma we'll be getting into
Yeah.
today. But first and foremost, you know, just for empathy reasons,
Uh-huh.
have you ever had any of your own battles with mental health?
Oh yeah, for sure. So I mean, I was diagnosed. I say quotation, as having general anxiety disorder. So and the funny interest as an immigrant family, like we didn't know about this. So I'm like, oh, something's wrong with me, and I don't know what it is. So that, and then later on, I actually only figured it out when I had my panic attacks in university. So I had struggled like a lot, right, throughout high school. Only at university, I remember like one particular incident, like I was walking up the stairs and I couldn't walk. I just fell. I was like, this is crazy, right? Like my legs couldn't move. I guess I was really intense in my panic attack. But only after that I was really fortunate enough to get some help, counseling, CBT, right? And it took me a long time, but it was a very fearful experience, because not the anxiety, the panic attacks really scared me, because I was scared to drive, because to be honest, I was like, I didn't know if my legs would move from the accelerator to the brake, right? That, because if anyone knows about panic attacks, unless you really know when and where, you don't know why it comes up, right? So I struggled that for a couple of years, but generally I do have anxiety. I took medication for a while, but I'm okay now. But I'm not against medication, but I'm not for it. It is what it is. So if I need it, I'm all about it. But yeah, so I mean, even as a social worker, I always tell people, like, everyone has their own little demons, right? You just need, if you own it, it just becomes more fluid and you can connect, right? And I can't say my anxiety is severe or less than somebody else's. It's just my anxiety. I name it, I make fun of it. I have a relationship with my anxiety, right? So it's one of those, like yesterday I had a really bad day, my anxiety was really high, and I told my friend, and then by like 12 o'clock at night, I was really exhausted, or I'm like, anxiety was like, okay, I'm not gonna like bother you anymore. It went out of my, right?
Okay,
So,
I'm curious. What time did you wake up today then?
I woke up at 5.
Did you say, wait, 5 in the morning?
I usually wake up between 5 to 5:30.
And
I
you
do have a
were
morning
panicking
practice.
until 12. So you slept 5 hours, what you're telling me?
Yes. So yesterday I was exhausted, but usually I do have a morning practice, right? Like, I think with people who are having a lot of challenges, it's important and we'll talk about it, having structure. So I have a structure that helps me to, like, it's hard, trust me. Like today at 5:30, I'm like,
Yeah, I was gonna
the way
say.
get up, right? But it just helps
Exactly.
me with my anxiety and just along the day, right? So yeah, so that's so anxiety it's one of the most common. Depression and anxiety is one of the most common mental illness, and I think a lot of us have it, but it's just how do you deal with it, how do you accept it, how do you let go of it, and you move on, right? Yeah, so that's my little challenge with anxiety, my little
I mean,
fight.
it does run off the same neurotransmitter as well, so it depends on its variant
Exactly,
of
yeah,
yeah, he's right. That's why they're hand in hand a lot.
exactly. And you know what, like, I feel like my sister and I, we always talk about our family mental health issues, right? Because we're both social workers, we just make like, not, we're just so comfortable talking about it, right?
You're
So
both social workers?
yeah,
Oh
we're
my
both
God, that
social
could make
workers.
some very interesting
Like,
family dinner
we
conversations.
diagnosed, like, even like, oh, my mom, my dad. So my dad had high anxiety, which now explains a lot of stuff, right?
Yes, it's
So we're like, okay,
hereditary as well, so.
right? So it's like all these, yeah. So yeah, with any kind of trauma, mental health, it depends on how you accept. If it's going to be a bad, like, that's how, like, if it's going to be like a thorn in your, in your skin, it's going to be thorn. But if I look at it as a rash, an ugly rash that never goes away.
It's true. I mean, that's why. I mean, YouthSpeak, we've covered these topics before about like coping and just resiliency and things like that. Because it's true, like you just said, it's not like it goes away. Like it's always gonna be like right
Not
there
for
on
a
your
lot of
shoulder,
us.
being like,
Yeah,
"Are you having a good day, Kavita? I feel like
exactly.
ruining it. I'm gonna ruin it
Exactly.
today."
Yeah.
You never know, right?
No,
But
right?
you know what I want to touch upon though? Oh my goodness, panic attacks. Oh my God. Okay,
That's
so
scary.
they're so scary.
Yeah.
I did not. I had my first panic attack. Like I had a stint of panic attacks for 3 months, I think,
Okay.
or 4 months, and it was in the beginning of 2019, I think it was, or 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Not because of COVID. This was like before that was a whole thing,
Uh-huh.
but I thought I was gonna die. I thought I had a heart attack. I
Yeah.
thought it was over.
Yeah.
It was done. I'm there like, oh my God, this is how I'm going. And that, yeah, it was crazy. And then the paramedics come, they're looking at me, and they're cool, calm, and collected because they're doing, I forgot what the word is, when they do the for your
Okay.
heart activities.
Like
But
like testing your heartbeat, yeah, your heart rate and all those things,
yeah, I
right?
forgot the term though. But
Yeah, yeah.
so they know it's a panic attack, but it ain't to me. Like
No, you
okay, it
felt like
is,
you're
but
living till
like
you're dying. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, right. And then so we're on the way to the hospital because whatever, I have to go there, and like they're just trying to keep me calm. It's like, don't worry, like this is, you'll get through it. I'm like, no, I'm not. It's over. It's over. Looking back, I'm like, what a baby. But like, I mean, at the time, I was
No,
crazy.
but it
So
is so real. And you know what? And what you went through, like I didn't go through it as much as you in that sense. Like, but a lot of my clients do go through, and they do genuinely feel like they're dying, because that's how powerful your body is when it's in that state, right?
yeah,
I mean, but statistically, nobody dies from a panic attack, but it feels like you're gonna die, right?
yeah,
And that's
exactly.
the important thing about educating yourself around your whatever you're going through, right?
Oh
Um,
yeah, that's how it goes. Like I mean, when I had that and then it kept happening, I'm like,
yeah,
okay, and they know it was happening. I'm like,
yeah,
this is it. I got to deal with this. So, I went to the doctors, and then they find out they're like, you're kind of having. They heard about go. I was going through some things. They're like,
yeah,
I think you're kind of going through depression, and this is your anxiety kind of getting out of
correct.
hand. I
Yeah,
you need to. So, well, I was put on medication, and then from there, and then even had to have like lorazepam in case it's coming,
yes,
and
yes,
in case you feel it and you can't stop it, then you take it, and then special guest. But anyhow, and then from there, I was able to get over it. And then just like you mentioned in the beginning, you're on medication, now you're not, because you need to take it when you need it. Maybe not all of
exactly.
us want to, right? Even
No,
doctors who prescribe it to me, they're like, I don't want you on this for too long, but just get through this right now.
yeah, and,
Right?
and it's just like any other illnesses, and and I think I talked to you in my podcast, like it's like when you have something very serious like diabetes, you say, well, it's going to have every medication we put into our body has a lot of side effects, whether we like
Hmm.
it or not. But
Hmm.
unfortunately, our society had made seem like physical illness is okay to take medication. For mental illness, it's not, right?
Like it's not even looked at as real sometimes, like we're
Exactly.
finally getting there. But
Yeah,
once upon a
right.
time,
Yeah. And so it's like, and medication is only one component of your healing process. It's not the only component, right? So yeah,
hmm
right. Yeah.
it's supposed to be so. One of the best things I ever was I know we're going off topic, but let's just get into this. It's good for people to know.
Yeah.
But when medication was being brought up, I remember the doctor saying this is not like a replacement. This is not an end all be all. Like this is for you to supplement with having to fix things in your life.
Yes.
So this will help you to buy you time to fix the root of the issue because it's like a
100%.
band-aid, right? You have to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
what's underlying causing
Exactly.
this.
Yeah. So
And yeah.
medication might be a first go-to, because how I explain it is like everyone has a baseline, right?
Mhm.
However it is, everyone has a baseline. When we're not feeling well emotionally, our baseline is off. And if it's too off, it's really hard to bring it down to your baseline. So medication for the time being, it can be 6 months, it can be a year, it can be 2 years. We don't know. It'll help to bring it down to your baseline. Once you're at the baseline, then you do therapy. Then you do other things, because and I know when you're so anxious, nothing will help you deal with it when you're highly anxious. But you don't want to go
Mhm.
there. You want to be anxious enough to recognize and work on it. And that's the good line. But
Yeah.
right, like that's it. So I think medication for some people will bring you to a baseline where you can actually talk to someone, put strategies in place, do self-care. But when you're overly anxious, you just can't focus, right? Like yesterday, I was so anxious. No, I wasn't overly anxious, but I was anxious to put things in place. But there are days, and where just like I can't think clearly. I just can't. So that's the time I'm going to take medication, because I needed to help myself, calm myself, so I can implement other stuff.
Yes, of course, Steve. I mean, the point is to try to ameliorate these what's being detrimental in our lives to be able
Yeah,
to live our daily lives. If something is getting in the way of your daily living,
exactly.
you have to deal with it, right? And you
You
cannot
want to
feel
deal with it.
shame. And
No,
I think a lot of times, many people will feel shame if they're
yeah,
seeking assistance, and even not just medication, but CBT. Oh, I'm not crazy.
yeah.
I don't need to go there.
I
I
don't need to
don't,
talk to
but
someone, right? Like I don't need to talk to. We're social beings. We need to talk to people, right?
mhm.
And and it doesn't have to be a therapist. It can be a good friend. It can be anyone. If you don't want to talk to people, do something that connects you again with your body. Because when we go through, especially like things like trauma or mental health issues, we get disconnected. And there's a lot of research that talks about how the first thing we do is just get connected. So your body and you're not connected with your body. And I think a lot of focus, especially in therapy, is to how do you reintegrate your body with you as a person, right? Your ego. So
It's
there's
true.
some things around those
It's
things.
in tandem, the mind and body.
Yeah.
It's both.
Yeah,
People
100%.
forget that.
Yeah.
So and I remember we touched upon this in our IG Live as well, where physical health and the physical body is revered, and that's okay to take care of. But your mental health is crippled because you're not allowed to engage with it the same way as you would with any physical ailments, right? It's terrible, but that's why with more conversations and more awareness, it's gotten a lot better.
It's better.
That can't be denied.
Yeah. And if you read books from what is it, what's the name, from Vancouver, the physician, like Peter Levine, Gomez, I forgot. He's a very famous. So there's a lot of people like Peter Levine and Jennifer Fisher and all those people talk a lot about how physical illness, not everything. I want to make sure I don't want the audience to say, "Oh my God, this is," but a lot of physical illness the root could be emotional blockage. Right? There's a lot of studies that are showing, especially like fibromyalgia and all those things, arthritis. I'm not saying put all, but a lot could possibly stem from a lot of, I didn't take care of my emotional needs when I was young or later on. I blocked it up. I kind of bandaged it up. Now it's coming through my body because your body needs to express this pain it has.
Well, I can actually share something about that. So, so there is, as you mentioned earlier, about a baseline, right? So we actually have a genetic disposition for how much of a baseline we're going to have.
Okay.
So, and this also goes with resiliency. And so what happens there is, there's even been studies, if you are, let's say, for example, depressed people or people who are sad will feel more physical pain than someone who is happy. It's like, think of it this way in your life. It's just at some point, think about a time you were hurt. If you're focusing on the pain, I fell on my elbow, for example, and I'm focusing on my elbow. What am I doing?
Exactly.
You know, I'm just focusing on that, and it's causing that pain. So they're trying to, and not trying to, they've proven it that a lot of times, especially with some kind of chronic pain. And so there could be, like you were saying, a more underlying factor to it that could be taken care of. And then that pain will be helped.
So the book I was talking to you about, When the Body Says No, by Dr. Gabe Mate. He's a physician, Vancouver physician. He has dealt with a lot of people, homeless people who had drug issues, and he had gone through his own journey. It's amazing some of the evidence he's talking about, right? So, and there's a lot now. I think we're moving towards why is physical illness so apparent nowadays, because we think it's a lot of unresolved emotional trauma that we dealt with, right? So interesting to know.
It is. And I mean, like I said, as more years pass by and more awareness is brought to it, we're going to understand that the health of someone is both mind and body and social health as well. Sorry, I forgot that. So I'm wondering though, considering all this that we've talked about, now going back to when your struggles with generalized anxiety, I'm wondering, was that a motivator for you to get into your line of work?
No.
Really?
I can lie and tell you a huge story about it. No, I wanted to be a teacher.
Whoa. Yeah, I want to hear it. Let's go.
Yeah, I wanted to be a teacher because I wanted to be a teacher. But when I got after my teaching degree, I always struggled with anxiety, but it wasn't a big thing. I'm like, whatever. Because obviously in my family, we don't talk about the struggles of anxiety. It's just like, you deal with life. Like you don't like, oh, let's get help. No, you just do it.
Just do it.
So as a teacher, once I finished, I tried to get a job at TDSB and I couldn't. It was really, really difficult. So I actually started working for CANTED, which is Canadian Tamil Youth Development Center. It's a youth organization for Tamil young people, right? I just wanted a job. I didn't care.
I think many people will relate to you on that.
Yeah, I was actually a teacher for like a short time in a private school, but it was really far. I'm like, I couldn't do it. So, so mind you, a little synopsis. So when I was doing the private school, I kid you not, I was so anxious that I actually started throwing up. I didn't know why. When I did my teacher's college, I did like 12 courses a year. I did everything. But when I had to teach, I was so physically sick. Like for me, when I get so anxious, I get physically sick. Like literally, I get like breakout, right? And for me, that's like, it's a blessing in disguise, because even though I might not feel anxious, when my body breaks out, I'm like, oh, okay, Kavita, like there's something else going on. So now I actually take it with them. I'm so grateful that my body does break out when I'm in denial about my own anxiety.
Well, I guess in a way, because you're saying it's at least communicating with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
I
So
see.
again, that's a perspective, right? Like some people are like, oh my God, I'm taking it as a positive thing. Just on a side note, I want to let you guys know this. So anyway, when I was teaching, I was so sick, and I like, my parents are supportive and everyone's supportive. They're like, are you sure you want to do this? Like, you're getting sick, you're anxious, you don't want to talk to people, you're like very like, so go ahead. Even then, I didn't know it was anxiety in the term anxiety that I know now. I just thought, maybe it's a lot of pressure. I put so many different labels, but the word anxiety, right? So anyway, so eventually I had to make a choice. I'm like, I can't do this because I'm physically getting sick. So I was like, you know what? The $30,000 I just paid up for my degree, it's okay, right? And so,
Ouch.
like, even when I tell you guys, it still hurts, right?
I'm sorry, I'm laughing. It's just, I know.
Money, it was all step money. So, but the good thing about me is I was able to say no. This is not good for me. Like, I'm so grateful I was able to say no, not continue and drag it on. After that, I'm like, I need a job. I got in Canada, and I loved it. Like, I kid you not, when I worked with those youth to help them to socialize them, like I felt like it felt good. Right. And that opportunity also helped me to get into TDSB through as a social worker. So I was
Okay, wow, look at you. You ended up there anyways.
I was working with the councils. I was doing this. So, I don't know, people like, you spend $30,000 to figure out you want to be youth worker, but I'm like, I don't know if this is my role. This is my role, right? So I worked there for like 3 years, and my boss was like, you cannot be working here with us you need to go get more experience and come back. Like, right? I don't want you to be stuck. So they were really good about it. So that motivated me to get my master's, because I knew with social work, if you don't have your master's, you really can't do the higher end things, right?
Yeah,
like clinical therapy. I
agree.
Right?
Yeah.
So I did that. I did that, and I went to work full time. I worked for a provincial government for like a youth worker, and then got it. And then I was very fortunate to get the CMHA. So, so it's all these things. And so I wanted to be a teacher. Like, social work wasn't in my thing, but also I didn't know any better. Like, my parents nobody told me about the word social work. Like, it didn't exist in my vocabulary. I always say, as an immigrant Indian, we didn't have the categories like either teacher, doctor, lawyer, like right? Like, let's be real, right? Like,
yeah.
Better, right? So when I got it, I was like, wow, like I felt right, I felt good, and I'm like, I didn't care if I had to pay another, but I knew I wanted.
What was your happiness, though?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
So I got into it. It was by fluke, but so I believe that everything just it was my journey. So when people are like, I don't know what they want to do, I'm like, I didn't find out until like I was in mid-30s, so it's okay. And after 3 degrees, I figured out what I wanted to do.
Well, okay, so I like that you answered that, because yeah, what a curveball. But what's funny is your anxiety may have blocked your path, but it actually somewhat led you into your line of work anyways.
125%. I'm telling you, it's my friend. Like, I actually acknowledge it. I make fun of it. I cry about it. I get mad at it, but it is something I've learned to live with. And
but it's funny how it's not the motivator. It just happened to help you. It nudged you in the right direction that you didn't know was the right direction. Exactly. So it's pretty cool, That's a great story.
Long as you find meaning, and I think a lot of us in mental health or trauma, we don't find meaning. And I think there's a lot of research that shows if you find meaning in your struggle, you're able to move
Utilize
forward a little bit better than if you find like, why me?
Well, it's funny how you say that, because I just did an IG live on Monday with Project Rise Up, who was actually speaking about that. It was a great conversation, and it was about how the perspective and change and fear. It's hard to change, and when you try to overcome all that, you realize, okay, what is in your control? Instead of saying, oh, woe is me, life is hard. Find the small things that you can start with to make the change to get there, and then and then you realize afterwards, you're like, when you get through it, which is not easy, but you get through your struggle, you will look back and say that struggle was able to define me. It was able to give me something, and it gives it, right. It was great. It was a lot of fun. But now, since we're touching upon trauma a lot, I actually did want to lead into the next question then. So I'm sure you've seen a lot of cases like this, but how does trauma look? And can you tell us in which ways trauma might manifest itself?
Okay. So even the word, so trauma is a new trending word, by the way. I don't think maybe 10 years, 15 years, it's not as spoken about.
Well, not maybe in the sense that we're discussing it, because trauma back then would have been like, blunt force trauma.
Exactly. Very like, I saw a war, I saw somebody die. And
exactly.
Right now, from my understanding, trauma can happen to anyone. Right. And my trauma and your trauma could be
guys. She just spoiled the next question, guys.
Oh, sorry.
I'm gonna ask. We're gonna touch upon that as well, but go ahead. You're saying.
So sorry, your question was how does trauma look like, right?
Yeah, and like ways it manifests itself.
So trauma could be very different for everyone. Like, so it could be emotional, psychological, it could be physical. So like, the thing with trauma is like, there's no definition. It's an emotional experience through something, an event. Right? Does that make sense? So
it does, because I can give you an example. I can give you one.
Okay,
phobias.
Yeah, please.
Phobias is a big example of like trauma. So, what happens is, if you ask anybody with a phobia, you ask them what you can ask them what their memory is. They will remember what their phobia is. It's like studies on this. So you'll remember. So I'll share my funny one.
Yeah.
So I had a phobia of bees. Terrified. Okay. Those wasps come around me. I'm running. Running. Okay. Grown man running. Yeah. So my first memory of that was a child who had an arm sling on, and it was all full of blood. Like, it was bloody sling. I couldn't believe it. I was in grade 1. See, I remember.
Oh, that's really young. Yeah,
What happened to your arm? I got stung by a bee. What do you think happened? I'm like, oh my God. So I associated that fear of a bee sting doing that to me. And it becomes an irrational fear. But later down the road, I learned that the kid just fell, and that's what happened. But anyhow.
So you connected quickly, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of times that's an example of a traumatic event or a traumatic thought that is manifesting
that's particularly
itself.
For you, because the kid, so it's interesting. So again, going back to what trauma looks like, it's going through a very stressful event that is frightening or distressing, right? That sometimes it's called trauma. Like a traumatic event can happen at any age. It can happen to anyone. And some people will go as far as it's an emotional shock. Right? I get in a car accident, you get in a car accident. You might be like, okay, whatever, it happens to everyone, I'll go. But I'm like, oh my God, I'll never drive again. It's it's not the event itself, how it impacts you and how you interpret is the key, I think.
And the associations made too. Back to your driving example.
Yeah.
What if like that accident happened at one intersection? Yeah. That intersection, you start to become you feel your anxiety creep up at that intersection. But then you get past it and you're driving fine the rest.
Yeah, exactly. So
just like that.
And if you Google trauma, there's definition, there's so many different things, but just it's a stressful event that is very personalized for you. And it's emotional shock, it's a physiological shock. The physical is there, but it's how I interpret what I experienced or what I saw. So it's not always what I experienced, what I saw. Like maybe you are a bystander and
that's an experience too, though, right? If you think about it.
Perceived, it could be one. Yeah. Like the B one, you didn't go through it, but what you heard from the child somehow had made like, no way, I'll never get put with B.
Well, you know what's funny? The way it ended my phobia was actually just last year, by the way.
Really?
I got stung by a bee, and my arm didn't explode like I thought it would. It didn't explode, so I'm like, I mean, ouch, that hurt, but my arm's still here. So that was it.
Trauma is also because like, logically, rationally, like, it doesn't make sense, and yet you can't. And a lot of us don't understand that. They're like, why, like, yeah, I know it, and I'm scared of the bees.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's why phobias are usually by definition are irrational fears, right?
Yeah.
And I know we're not discussing phobias today, but it is a good example of a trauma as well, right? Because of what we just talked about. So the next question was going to be is if can anyone have trauma or PTSD? And of course, you answered it. Anyone can. Now, that's the thing that Kavita was saying earlier was this is something that we're bringing to light in more recent years, because back then trauma or PTSD is only going to be like war veterans, like something extremely huge, but we're starting to realize and learn that you can actually go through these kind of traumatic events and PTSD and have the physical manifestations of them even in day-to-day life. Imagine, for example, we're going to get a little bit dark here, but abusive relationships. That is traumatic. That is PTSD. Then when they have trust issues or they're fearful of men or something along the sorts, that is a result of previous experiences creating a traumatic event for them, or a traumatic experience or traumatic train of thought. So, I'm sure you have a lot more to say on the topic. So what would you like to add to it?
No, I think you touched on a lot of points. Yeah, like anyone can experience it. So you're not immune from trauma, right? But again, just also please highlight that trauma doesn't mean that I need to see someone get killed. I need to be in a war. It could be a simple thing as I stepped over something that I wasn't like I fell on ice and I hit my head or my face, and it was okay. But that going on the ice was I will never go on ice again.
Yeah.
Right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be huge. It can be simple, but all of us interpret the world differently, right? So post-traumatic stress is part of trauma. So trauma, I look at it like an umbrella. Within trauma, there's different sections. And so post-traumatic stress is PTSD. Is what happens is it's a mental health condition that's triggered by a terrifying event, but when you experience it or witness it, the symptoms stay there for longer. So I fell on the ice. After 1 day, 1 week, I'm okay. Like I'm like, okay, whatever. But some people like never again, I'm gonna get on the ice again.
Or you know what's happened too?
Yeah.
I've also read of certain case studies. Let's just relate it to the ice, where you went on the ice, you fell really hard, you hurt your head, you're like, whoa, maybe a trickle of blood, you're like, whoa, what's going on? Then you got up and you were fine. And then you're ice skating the next day, and then you know what? A year later you went on the ice and all of a sudden you're freaking out. You're like, what's going on? And you didn't realize, but that was actually a traumatic event. You internalized
100%.
And that's it.
Yeah, right. So that's the PTSD, and there's a lot of PTSD, we can't diagnose it. It's more like when you get flashbacks, when you have severe anxiety, when you can't stop eating, when you have constant thoughts about that event, right? Those could be related, but it's very tricky. Like, for me, whether it's PTSD or not, because I don't work in the capacity, I see trauma as trauma. It's affecting you. It's affecting the function of your life. So whether you have this label, and I think we're going to talk about labels, whether it happens, whether it is PTSD and it's a label or not, it's affecting you. Right? You're not able to have a good night's sleep. You can't eat. So, it is PTSD, but if you want a official diagnosis, there's a process to go through.
There's and we'll talk about why that's important, but another way too of how of traumatic events or PTSD or each forms of trauma, the way they might manifest itself is weight gain has been something that's been linked. So what they'll say is, because physically what you're doing is gaining weight because you're trying to have this layer of armor around you, and you do it subconsciously. Because you're building physically a protective shell, and you don't realize this, but they're trying to find that's one of the ways that it might manifest itself, right? So in case you ever see someone with a dramatic weight gain, it's possible they've been going through something.
You're right. Yeah. Because, when you eat something with emotional eating, why are we doing this? We want to kind of numb the feelings. But maybe, as you said, you're right. And I've actually heard stories, not in that context. I've heard I became big, so nobody will ever abuse me again. I can become the
where you go.
Right. I will never be a victim again. That one, I wanted to get the big job and I want to be at top of my game, because then I will never be poor again. I will always get respect.
Yeah.
trauma in its essence.
I will share that for me, that career path is definitely something I to this day have. Like growing up in abject poverty, I don't realize how much that still carries into my adult life. And like, for example, the fear of having kids. I'm afraid to have kids because I don't want my kids to grow up in this poverty. And I mean, I'm doing decent now. Like, if you know, fancy job, all the kind of adulting we're supposed to do, but I still have that fear.
Yeah.
So imagine that, right?
And we are like, we kind of know things, right? Rationally.
Yeah.
We struggle with this, right? But it's about the struggle, it's about the acknowledgement, and then what do you do with it? That's where so sometimes we get stuck, and it's a lot of work to kind of come out of the other way, but at least you know that now. Like, this is probably one of the reasons why I struggle with having kids. And it's not a right or wrong thing. This is who you are. You just have to work through it. And whatever you choose is okay. And being okay is important too, right? I mean,
of course, yeah. It took a lot of internal discussion, but I know for sure that's just one example. But how many examples have you already given in ways that trauma manifests itself, and in ways that, you know, how anybody can experience it? It's very versatile, and I'm glad that it's coming into fruition, right? But I know that you you have a big brain, so you're going to tell us about this stuff, okay? We're going to get technical now, all right? Can you tell us a bit about how trauma could affect the brain at a neurological level?
I love this. I love neuroscience. It's so much fun.
I know it is.
So you have to realize we don't have time to go into a lot of complex, but
of course,
the thing is, in a nutshell, you have your rational brain. Okay, well, no, let's start with when you're a baby. When the first part of the brain, it's the instinctive brain, the reptilian
cerebrum and cerebellum.
Yeah, right. The reptilian, which is at the back. That's the first part of the brain that gets developed near your spine, right? Then after that, that's like when babies like poop, eat, sleep, cry, basic. And all animals have this. The second part is the limbic brain, or the emotional brain, which is in the middle of the brain, right? So
memory as well.
Yeah, that's mammals, right? Like so the first part is like lizards, snakes, and all that. That's the middle part, when you have emotional brain, it's the mammals, like the dolphins, the human, the monkeys, right? So we are emotionally reacting to things. It's great, but this is where we get stuck, and we'll talk about it. This is where a lot of us mammals will like fight and flight mode comes in. When I get threatened, am I running away? Am I going to fight, or am I going to play dead? Right? A lot of mammals, like elephants and zebras, will play dead, because they're like, if I play dead, the person who's hunting me will think that they're playing dead, and they'll go. But as humans, we have a hard time with that. Right? Playing dead for us sometimes looks like being numb. You don't feel anything. You just there. Right? I know you're thinking, and I'm thinking, what are you thinking? But the last part is the rational brain. That's the prefrontal cortex, right? That's the last piece that's developed in the human development. But it's also and this is the only thing that makes us different from other animals, because we can actually rationally think about stuff. This part of the brain kind of comes online after like 28, 29. It's fully developed is not until like 28, 29. That's why young people think they can rule the world. They're not ever going to die, because that part of like saying, making logic decisions, making like you shouldn't be doing this, those things don't come online later on, until the later on in life, right? So,
you know, before they used to say that part of the brain, well, first it was, 18 fully developed. Then they're like, wait a minute, I think it's 21. Then they're like, wait a minute, I think it's 25. Yeah. So it's showing that, just how long it takes for it to actually fully develop.
And we there's no one number, by the even now, you're right. Even now we don't have a number, we have a range now.
Yeah, exactly. What kids do, they gave up. They're like, okay, sorry guys, we can't do this.
Because the brain is so complex. But coming back to why we act the way we do, it's all about our lovely emotional brain. Like, our emotional brain is the brain center for why we get mad, why we cry, why we yell, why we beat up people. Because if, as a young person, we haven't learned to regulate our emotion, or say someone is safe there for you, our emotional brain the brain itself, its role mainly is to protect you at any cost. At any cost, it will protect you. So when something bad happens to you when you're young, right? You might use a coping strategy. Like, for example, I love listening to music. Amazing coping strategy, right? You get something bad happens in life, you're like, okay, when I listen to music, it's great. I can calm myself, right? Great. You now go to university, you're in workplace, something bad happens to you. You can't, you don't like what the boss is saying. So what do? You shut down and you just listen to music. So the coping strategy that helps you deal with the stresses in life when you were young, when your parents was always fighting with you, is now becoming something that's a negative coping strategy because you're not dealing with it. But the problem is our brain can't distinguish when you're just feeling something. Our brain can't distinguish between that happened long time ago and this is something different. It just thinks like, oh my God, Kavita is in danger. I must protect her. So I'm going to do whatever I have to do to protect her. Right? So again, it's so interesting, the brain, like it cannot know that this was past and this is present.
Yeah, it's just a stimuli that it initiated a very great deal of emotional damage at one point, and that's it. The brain's like, okay, that thing's a danger. You know what I mean?
And so, and the point of like medication or therapy is to first of all give through psychoeducation, kind of talk about these things. It's not you, like, the more I understand these things, the more I'm like, we really don't have a lot of control over these. It's the brain is telling you what to do. So to gain control, we have to first understand what's happening in our brain. Second thing is, part of getting control, emotional regulation, is to get the front brain back online. So when bad things happen to you, your front brain shuts down, your nervous system goes into parasympathetic and
sympathetic and parasympathetic.
Yeah, right. It goes into those mode because it wants to just protect you. But we got to tell. So, but for it to say, hey, like this is not real danger, it's a perceived danger. It's not really, somebody's not really yelling at you. You might feel like it. You need the front part of the brain to be online, but you can't do it unless you have techniques to work on it. Does that make sense?
There are a couple of ways we could, I don't know, of course. So here, some ways people can relate to this real, kind of recall when your frontal lobe is shutting down. If your hand is on a stove and it's on, it's gonna, like, your brain cannot wait for you to think if that's okay or not. It'll instantly react and just move your hand, and then you'll realize it hurts, and then you realize, okay? So that's one way you can see how your fight or flight works. Another thing is if you've ever been scared and you had those moments where you're gonna hit your friend, it took your brain to stop it at that moment before you hit them. Sometimes not. By the way, that fist might go flying. We've seen those clips. But if your frontal lobe in time could react to how you reacted there, then you'll stop that punch. If you have a fight response, otherwise, boom, and then you'll be like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," Jimmy or whatever their name is. So those are
along that way. Like, say your house is on fire, the smoke detector goes on. You're like, oh my God. So if people are very traumatized with a lot of like uncertainties in their life, they're like, oh my God, the fire's on, you got to run. Because the only thing your emotional brain is like, oh my God, there's fire, you need to run. But if you are able to have some logicness, your rational brain on, you'll be like, well, let me just go check the kitchen. Let me see if everything is okay. You're like, oh yeah, the pot is burning. That's why it is. But for that to happen, you need to be able to have control over the front brain. And it's a perceived threat too. So the minute the alarm is on, your body's like, it's an actual threat, there's fire. It's not real fire, it's a perceived threat. And actual threat was important back in the days when we were hunters and gatherers, right? Because there's a tiger, you need to save your life, right? You don't have the time about perceived or not, it's actual threat. But now in modern time, our brain hasn't developed as quick as our modern time. So we have a lot more perceived threat than actual threat.
Yeah, it's very maladaptive in that way.
Yeah, right.
It's going to take some time for it to evolve, which I don't know.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like,
Actually, epigenetics is a good example of
yes,
the brain
yes,
slowly evolving to be able to adapt to our modern day threats. But like you said, yeah, I mean, it's still kind of in a hunter-gatherer phase,
it
and we
is.
got a lot of threats nowadays.
And we need to work, especially with when we have been really bombarded with really bad things in our lives. It's harder, it's more work, but at the end of the day, if you don't get through it, it's so much more work to deal with it, right? And it's
Hmm.
tough. Like it's really tough, and all of us go through it at certain levels, but sometimes some people have it harder, I think, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what we were saying about I mean, there's always going to be nature and nurture,
Yeah.
right? So, but we did discuss before that you will always have a biological and genetic disposition to how much resiliency you will have or what your baseline for your happiness level will be. So, there are some things that you may not be able to control, but then afterwards, it will be, that's where the nature part
So
comes in.
so
You
you
have
have
to,
the
or
base.
nurture part comes in, you
Yeah,
grow it.
yeah, exactly. You have the baseline, right? Everyone's baseline, but you can work on it
Yeah.
to get, like, I am probably predisposed to anxiety. I think I have a family
Yeah,
genetics, but I
exactly.
can say, oh my God, I have no control over this. Or I can work on it to become a better, maybe I won't be maybe as good as you, right? Because you don't have the predisposition, right? But but my goal is it to be like you? Is it to just up my level so I can enjoy the things in life that I want to,
Exactly. To
right?
function. I agree.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
So as you see just how technical it gets and you see how versatile trauma
Mhm.
is. So now this is the part where I'm wondering, you as a social worker, you probably have seen this. How difficult is it to diagnose it?
So you can't diagnose trauma per se. Like you don't. There's nothing like, oh, there's a diagnosis of trauma. Like you just like, oh, I experienced trauma, or I have experienced trauma. You within the trauma within DSM, there's different things that you can diagnose within the trauma. So trauma with PTSD, trauma with dissociative personality, right? So trauma, I look at it as an umbrella term. So within that, there's other things that you can actually diagnose, like, right? So and also trauma itself is just a word that we put meaning to it. But what is happening within the trauma? Because you and I can have trauma, but we don't need to get any diagnosis, because like whatever, functional trauma, and but why do you need the label, and what is it serving you? That's also important to ask.
Yeah. That's the next question.
Yeah.
Is it important to have a label for it?
It depends on who you talk to. Some people like meaning, some people don't care for it. Some people with the label, sometimes you get more things out of it, like you can get more support. Some people, but it's also can be a stereotype, a stigma. So it really depends on your values, how you look at it. Do you own it? Do you give the power to somebody else? Like, would I have talked about in my anxiety disorder maybe 15 years ago? I would have, but not to this extent. I would have just
What you're
bypassed
saying?
it. Oh yeah, I have this, right? But now I'm more comfortable to talk about it in detail. When I had my anxiety disorder in university, it was very important to get it labeled, because then I get more support in when I was
Yeah.
writing my papers, when I was doing my exams, right? At work, it's very important for me to have my not anxiety disorder, but my learning disability, because then I get accommodation, I get like things from my right. So it just depends on what you want. I'm working with someone who says like, you know what, Kavita, I don't want my agency to know that I have a learning disability, because it's very frowned upon, because she's in a high position, right? It's not like you're smart, right? So it depends on a lot of stuff. So why do you need it? There's no right or wrong answer. What purpose does it serve you? Because there is a purpose when you do get labeled, but on the other side, sometimes it can also backfire on you. It
I
should.
was gonna add about that. It's
It
true. I
should.
was gonna say for sure. I was gonna bring up because as I've mentioned on this podcast, I mentioned to you of where I work at a university, and
Yeah.
I've seen students, let's say for OSAP funding, um, if they have that disability on hand and they're labeled as such, they're able to get a lot more assistance. Now, think about that. These labels might be needed. That's why a lot of times there is some lobbying. There is some what's the word I'm looking for? protests and such. I'm trying to recall some recent ones, but
Mhm.
a lot of these labels that are labels now have been there through the communities or those who have suffered these debilitating effects, and they're the ones that were out there fighting for this because
Yeah.
maybe they cannot work full-time hours, or maybe they cannot, do this or that. They need some accommodation, and the only way to get legal on paper accommodation is to have that label.
Unfortunately, yeah.
But
Unfortunately.
then you mentioned, and it's true, those stereotypes or the
That's
stigmas
good
will
also,
come
right?
up.
So, but it's again, so I mean, for me, it doesn't matter. Like, my labels come out when I need to help myself. If this is going to help me move forward, I am going to use it.
I mean,
But
that's
if
good,
it's
but not a lot
not,
of people think like that, which is
yeah, if
bad.
it's not, it's not. And so, and if I can, and part of my thing is like I do a lot of documentation. I need like a dictation program. It helps me with my learning disability. Why am I going to struggle? Like my whole thing, if this technology, why am I suffering? Like I don't get it in my head,
I agree. I
right?
agree. Like, what's the
But it's
point?
not
We have
everyone.
resources, use them, you know?
Exactly. But but it is a process for me to come to terms with it. Like I think because of my work and because what I've gone through, it has been a journey, to be honest. It's not something like I didn't get up one day. I'm like, oh, I love being ahead. Like, there's nothing like that. It's like I love these challenges because it makes me such a great person, right? No, right?
Oh man, yeah. I love how you brought up too. Like, it must be difficult when you're in like higher positions, and then you mentioned if someone hears you have a learning disability. A lot of people, not a lot, but some people might not differentiate the fact that a learning disability does not mean at all of any
Nothing.
impact about your
No,
IQ or your DOM or whatever.
nothing.
Come on, that is not the
No.
case. It is
Then
that they need to learn in a different way. There's a lot of different ways to receive information.
it's
That's
the
just
way
one of
people
them.
actually are smarter than an average Joe. However, it's just that we think differently, right? Like we think differently. But the problem is if you're in mathematics, like I think you were saying that some people think people who have learning disabilities, like some are dumber or not as smart. But averagely, we actually excel in certain part of the thing. It's just that our brain works differently, right? We see things, we learn differently, and unfortunately, I think now a lot of people are understanding how a lot of people with learning disability um, think, but it's not always the case, right? But there's a stigma. So if I say that I have a learning disability on my interview, I even till this day I'm like, I don't say that because I'm like, you don't know me, you're going to judge me, right? I won't
I
say it.
know.
I only say
Yeah.
it once I get the job and I need it, right?
It's over, Kavita. We're judging you, right,
I
guys? It's
know, I know.
over. We
That's
judged
like
her.
you gotta
We
get
judged her.
comments. Like,
I mean, how dare? I'm sorry, you're dumb now. No, but I understand.
but
I know what you mean, and it's true. It's not
you have to
nice, you
be
know.
careful, right? Like I do think you should be careful on who you share this information with, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
and that sucks. But hopefully, that's going to be something that, because we're like, as you mentioned, we're starting to realize there are so many more ways to intake information.
Yeah.
It's not, you can't, like, disabilities, be it physical or mental, they are just different ways of experiencing the same life that we all have.
Yeah.
And we're finally getting to a point where we're realizing this. So those who do have learning plans or things like that, they may be probably are going to be so much better than you at something that you never would have thought. So,
Yeah.
that's always something I find interesting.
Yeah. 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 For sure. Yeah.
So that was the importance about labels. So
Yeah.
as you see, they could be both very good or very bad. It does bring a lot of support to a lot of people, but at the same time, we just talked about how badly it can be used against you. But for the last question of this podcast, we did talk about how expensive therapy could be,
Yeah.
even
So
medication too. So
yeah,
I
100%.
know you have some ideas about how we can kind
Yeah.
of do
So
some of these things inexpensively.
yeah. So yeah. Thanks. Yeah. No. So okay. So in theory, therapy is not free. OHIP, I don't think OHIP covers it. So for
Oh yeah,
example,
we're
where I
Canadian.
work,
For the Americans watching us, we're Canadian. So yeah,
oh
but
yeah.
hips are a little Canadian
Oh,
healthcare.
so like where I work, my agency, Scarborough Center for Healthy Communities, we actually offer 8 session therapy for clients who cannot afford it, right?
Whoa.
Which is amazing. Like which is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Scarborough, it's amazing for those people. And so we deal with a lot of different stuff that, if a client wants to talk about it, we can. We just need the doctor's referral, and they have to be in Scarborough. You know how everything has its boundaries, right?
Yeah,
So that's one thing.
municipalities.
And in different cities, I'm sure there's something similar model, I'm sure. That said, if you have to pay out of pocket, it is expensive. I know it hurts me and bothers me, but it is. It's at least more than $100, like $120 minimum for an hour. A lot of us cannot afford $120 for a 50-minute session. A lot of us, if we're very fortunate to have some benefits, it's great.
Which is also rare, by the way, because not
Rare.
everybody accepts mental health.
No, and if you do, it's like $200, $300, and if you're saying $120, you're gonna get 2 sessions, like, you know. So there's
That's
a
it.
lot of barriers even to get better, right? You talk about medication. If you don't have the money, how are you gonna get the medication, right? Like, so it's easy for you and I to talk about it, but there's so much systematic barriers for anyone to want to change if they want to change, because they can't. It's hard. You're already struggling with your own mental health issues or whatever you're going through. Now you have to say, I have to not go to the doctor. You know, what if they don't have transportation? Are they going to come to my office? That's struggle, right?
I can share that I've been through that, by the way.
Yeah.
As I mentioned before, I've grown in poverty. There's times that they said, all right, you need these pills. You think I took them? No, because I couldn't afford it. I'm like, oh, I got no benefits. What am I going to do?
Exactly. You
It's
know, and then
terrible.
you on top of it, you have, you know, you're like all agents have some certain boundaries. So like, you know, I mean, it's obviously our agency is very flexible. We're social workers, we're always flexible. But you know, like you miss 3 appointments, you miss 6 appointments. You know, you're kind of not in the program. All these small things make it. I get where the agency is coming, but they have to also have stuff, right? Funding, whatever. But it's also challenging for our people to get help. I think that's number one, right? So when I do when I do therapy or counseling, I don't do therapy because it's in and out, but I say counseling. Like I always try to introduce them to things that they can do on their own. If they decide not to come back, if they decide to say, you know what, this is not for me, or like even in my private practice, I'll give them tools. So, you know, yes, I want you to come back, but if you can't, I don't want to be the one to be like, I'm sorry, if you don't come back, I'm not going to help you out. Here are some, so there's some free tools, and I wanted, maybe if you're okay with it, let me just share some of them with them. I think this is important, right?
Yes, very important.
If for the audience, you know, one of the things that I like is it's called bilateral music. Bilateral music is a new thing around. So we have different frequencies. We work in different frequencies. So our brain also works in different frequencies. So there's a lot of studies that show that sometimes our left and right hemispheres don't talk to each other when we are very emotionally distressed or traumatized. You're left, you're right. Like that's why we become emotional. We don't think logically. So
That corpus callosum is sleeping.
yeah, like they don't, literally they don't, they were saying, right? So there's, if you Google, YouTube, like EMDR, bilateral music, right? So there's some, it's not, it doesn't, please, anything I tell you, it's not like it's a miracle thing. It'll help you reduce some of your ongoing, possibly for some people, ongoing stress. So you listen to it with the headphone, it's like tick tock, it's soft music, but it calms. For some people, it has the effect of calming them down. Some people will trigger crying. Some people will be very emotional. But for other people, nothing happened. But I don't know how it works for you guys, but that's something that you might want. A calming music. Very calming music will help, right? Also, so EMDR is like eye movement desensitization. So it's like, it's the idea that, you know, there's something research that shows that when we think about a thought and you go from left to right, your brain is processing it while it's the eye movement is going back and forth. It's going to run REM cycle idea. I don't know. There's a lot of research to it. Again, these are expensive therapies, but there are things out there on YouTube you can do, like, for example, a butterfly hug. So when you're anxious, when you do it, just a butterfly hug, like soothing. Like this is soothing. If you do it for like a couple of minutes, it calms your nervous system down. Like if I give you a hug and I just rub you like this, just like, okay, it's okay. You do the same thing. You're cuddling your body, right? It's just like, you know, you do that. Or what you do is you can tap on, so, you know, acupuncture, Chinese medicine, acupuncture, different points on our body. So one of the points is if you just tap like that, it allows release of energy, right? Just small tapping. The other one is emotional freedom technique, is tapping in different parts of your body. There's a way of doing it, but just tapping and talking through a particular way can release a lot of emotional distress that you're going at the moment, experiencing at the moment, right? Again, it's called emotional freedom technique. You can self-learn it. I mean, we're only doing basics, right? So you can self-learn and do it. It's really powerful. I do it on myself. I do it on my clients. I've seen changes. So again, they're not like permanent, but they will, for the moment, give you some relief, right? So these are like, I like energy. I like all these things. So this is alternative method, but simple, that you and I know about it. Going for a walk, putting your feet on grass and grounding yourself, feeling the grass under your feet if you're all about that. Sitting under a tree, hearing the wind blow. It's very.
I want to add something to that, by the way. Okay. What Kavita is just saying. Meditation is a big one that everyone uses and mentions. Mm-hmm. But if you ever meditated in that capacity, feeling that and concentrating on all the things that you're saying, the experience that you're taking in, that is going to be a beautiful session of meditation.
Exactly.
I just want to add that. Sorry.
And meditation is very powerful. Mindfulness is so powerful. But guess what? I cannot till this day do beautiful mindful sessions because I'm so highly anxious when I focus on my breath. So
what you mean? Yeah, that's true. I could see that.
Right? Like, and I've done meditation for over 10 years, and I'm not good at it. As someone who, I kid you not, some of my clients like, oh my career, this is the best thing that happened. But for me, I struggle with it, although I am a devoted
yeah, wow. But I mean, what you mentioned was great because it's kind of like, one of the exercise, like guided meditation, we'll be talking, like you're going to try to imagine those things. But now Kavita is telling us, no, don't imagine it. Just go to the park. Do that.
That's easier for
Feel
me.
it.
Yeah. For me, sensation is more easier than sitting and following my breath, right? So it's important to know, like, just because mindfulness is very powerful and it's excellent, but it might be challenging for people like me, right? Eventually, I will get there. But the honest truth is, it's been 10 years and I have made huge progress. So, but it's not like someone I like my clients are better than me yet sometimes with mindfulness than I am, right? So, and that's okay. That I'm not competing for other people, right? So one of the things I've learned right now is doing breath work. I don't know if you guys know about breath. So breath work is a breathing prana, which is breath, right? In science way. You want to regulate our breath. When we are not emotionally well, our breath is always everywhere, right? So something else you guys might want to look into, it's called breath work. How do you regulate your breath all the time? But that alone is a practice. So I do it, and you say, how come you get up at 5 o'clock? I get up because my first practice in the morning is breath work for half an hour. And actually, I have seen a huge improvement in my anxiety because the first thing I'm doing is monitoring my breath for the first half an hour of my day. Doesn't mean that I don't get anxiety. I do, but I'm more control in it, right? So, but breath again, try, like, breath works are something that you need someone to guide you. It's not something that I would say, because you're dealing with breath, but alternative thing. Somatic movements idea that you're moving with your body. So you're singing and dancing, you're punching things, like you're allowing energy to flow through you. So somatic movements also are all about your body moving in different ways, techniques. So yoga is a somatic movement, jumping up and down, kickboxing, right? So again, one thing I want to say, so when we are very highly anxious or highly in emotional distress, our front brain shuts down, emotional brain is there, right? So you can't think through, oh, Kavita, you need to breathe, sit, this is not rational. You can't think through it unless you got a lot of practice in it, because the front brain is already done, it's shut off. So we have to start with your reptilian brain, your instinct brain. What does the instinct brain want to do? Oh, it wants to eat, it wants to sleep, it wants to avoid it. So you have to do something that is tactile, that is body oriented. You can't think through, you can't come to me in therapy when you're so highly vital, say, Kavita, I need you, because because again, I said that unless you're like able to think through it, and most of us are not, you need something tactile to kind of allow you to calm yourself down. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah,
so
it does.
the idea that's bottom up and top down, right? Bottom up is rational logic. But can you think of a time when you're like so logic, when you're so emotional? Like when you want to yell at something, like, oh, let me think about yelling at you. Is it a good thing or a bad? You're like, ah!
Exactly. No, yeah, you regress. Like it's over.
And then you regret because you act on your emotional side. So during that time, what we're finding is, if instead of thinking about it, right, let's do something about, okay, I feel upset. I'm going to yell at you. Instead of like thinking about, let me just go and put cold water on my face to just like cut that feeling off. Let me do 20 push-ups, right? Physical stuff, like you, right? Those things are probably better than thinking about, okay, I shouldn't yell at you. I see a perspective. This is where you want to get to, but maybe for some of us, we just need to work on letting it out initially, right? So that's something that I'm teaching my clients. I also am including, like, I always thought about logic, just like, no, when I'm mad at someone, I am not thinking about being kind. I'm thinking about, I want to get my point across to you, and I'm going to do it and that's not the correct answer, but I'm human at the end of the day, right? So I'm working.
Shouldn't yell at us. We gotta run.
Like, so think about those things and don't be hard on yourself. Like, I'm very open with my clients. Like I'm a social worker, but at the end of the day, I'm also a human being. I'm a daughter, I am a sister, all those things. And I think that's the message. It's like, we're not perfect and it's okay to be imperfect.
We forget that a lot, and you're right about that.
Yeah.
All right, well, it's been a blast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate this talk.
I'm pretty sure that you were my, if not the first guest I've had on IG Live, one of the first, like first 3 or so, and now you will be my last. So it's great how it works it's great how it works like that. So, well, Kavita, where can the people find you?
Okay, so you can follow me at Kavita Dreams. It's just so like I collect little reels from other people. I put it on, just something that inspires me, and I want to share with you guys. Or if you guys are interested in talking further with me, maybe doing I offer a free 15-minute consultation for therapy. You guys can always connect with me at kavita.therapy@gmail.com. And maybe you can put it up too. I don't know.
Yeah, wait a second. When did you start? Because I feel like you were just starting the last time, or were about to, and now you're full-fledged.
Yeah, it's
oh my
it's always been
goodness.
at the back of my head, right? I've always done private on a side, but I haven't really into it. So I'm just like, this is my next step. And trust me, guys, I have anxiety doing this.
Doesn't look like it, but you do it phenomenal. So,
right? So yeah, if you're just interested in counseling or just want to have a consultation, one of the things is, if you guys are ever having consultation, ask them for a free 15-minute consultation. Well, a lot of social workers or psychotherapists will give you that, because we believe in having a good fit between a therapist and the client, right? And sometimes you might have things that I'm not an expertise in, right? So I don't want you to come to. So I think it's good. So this is another tip that I can offer you guys. But if not me, there's Psychology Today, Green Space are all like agencies that can help you find someone who's suitable for you.
All right. Well, you gave a lot of great tips and a lot of great knowledge today. I'm very sure many people are going to leave very knowledgeable. But with that, we are going to conclude today's podcast. As I mentioned, this is my last one, so thank you, everybody. So one last shout out from me to TD Bank for sponsoring all of our IG Live and podcast content. I'm your host, Christian, and this is Kavita, and it's going to be a good night from us.
Thank you. Thanks, Christian. Thanks, everyone.
If you want to hear more stories, don't forget to subscribe, comment, and like. To support more youth by youth-led projects, visit us at youthspeak.ca, where you can donate and spread youth mental health awareness.
YouthSpeak Performance Charity. Speak, inspire, change.